Welcome to the latest episode and the first episode in a brand new show called Fight Night Pick Selects. And Matt, this show is going to be totally unlike any other show that we have because we're going to select our top three in whatever category you choose for us. So totally new idea to the channel, totally different from Parry and Counter or the Fight Picks. You let us know in the comments down below what you want to see us cover next. We've got all sorts of great ideas coming out the gates. But Matt, our first one, we're going to go with Fight Night Picks selecting our top under-the-radar fighters. And I know this is a question that we've been asked before. We've kind of talked about it before, but we're going to go all around the MMA world. This doesn't totally pertain to UFC, but I know we're going to go primarily with some UFC fighters. But in terms of under-the-radar fighters that are out there right now, there's a lot of guys and girls that may not be getting the shine or the recognition that we think that maybe they deserve. And maybe it's unjust. Maybe it is just. Maybe we haven't seen them fighting quite a bit, but they put together an impressive run. I know a tweet that was put out there not that long ago. And a lot of different names came up. I saw Matt Brown's 7-fight win streak. I saw a lot of people pointing towards Nova Scotia's own TJ Grant and his run at lightweight. There were a lot of different fighters that were thrown out there, but for the purpose of what we're going to do here today, we're talking fighters that are currently fighting in the UFC that have wicked records that nobody's focusing on. Matt, I'm excited about this. Great idea moving forward. I know we're going to continue with it, but for today's purposes, under the radar fighters, what's the first fighter that you're going to go with?
So the first guy I'm going to go with, he looks just like a regular person you'd see on the street, and he blinks quite a bit. And, oh, yeah, if you give him your leg, he's probably going to rip it off your body. And that's Ryan Hall. I know that every single time Ryan Hall is kind of, there's a rumor out there about potential matchmaking, it's always him against kind of an unranked guy. And I know he beat Darren Elkins, who I think had a number next to his name at the time. I know Ryan Hall's ranked at least 15th the last time that I checked, but he's one of those guys who, yes, he is in the rankings. He's starting to get a little bit more notoriety. But when you really think about, like, true killers of the 145-pound division, no one thinks about Ryan Hall. And for good reason, like I just said, he's the least intimidating guy in the whole UFC. But when you actually look at his skill sets, he's basically a Chrome Gracie with a more developed striking as of right now. And when you just take those two skill sets, put them together, people like to make fun of his striking, but like he throws really good spinning back kicks and whatnot. He's very, unorthodox that way. So he goes from like really good karate to some of the best jiu-jitsu in all of MMA. So I really do think that Ryan Hall is one of the most underappreciated guys in the UFC and just in any MMA organization, really.
Yeah, he's kind of like the UFC's Gary Tonin in a way, where not a lot of people want to fight him. And oh, by the way, all of a sudden he has a very intricate and explosive striking style that a lot of people might not expect. And to your point, not a lot of people in the UFC roster want to take a fight with Ryan Hall. I mean, you think about the balls that it took for BJ Penn to want to take that fight, but realistically, he's one of those guys that he's like a triple threat everywhere he goes, and you have to watch out for him. Now, if we're talking guys that won seasons of The Ultimate Fighter, kind of like a Ryan Hall, I'm going to go in a totally different direction, and a guy he's getting up there in age, but he just keeps winning in Leonardo Santos, and he's 40 years old, which is crazy to think. He won the Ultimate Fighter season Brazil, season 2 of the Ultimate Fighter Brazil back in 2013 at welterweight. Leonardo Santos is a guy that's competed at IBJJF events. He's competed at ADCCs. He's bronzed and won silver medals, but that was back in the year 2000 and 2001. Now, why am I bringing this guy's name up? So if you go all the way back to his time on The Ultimate Fighter, he won that season by winning against William Macario. Now, maybe not all that impressive. He goes on to draw against Norman Park when he drops down to lightweight. This is in 2014. Since then, he's gone on a run and beaten some recognizable names, the likes of Efrain Escudero, who's one of those just bleed types, Anthony Rocco Martin, where he submitted him, Kevin Lee, he won by TKO, Adriano Martins, split decision, and then he knocked out Stevie Ray in June of last year. It was a first-round straight-up knockout, one performance of the night against Kevin Lee, and you never hear anybody talking about Leonardo Santos. Oh, by the way, Leonardo Santos, so I said, he started off the 2000, 2001, he was, medaling at World Jiu-Jitsu Championships. So he takes his first pro fight. Who's his first pro fight against? In 2002? Takanori Gomi, and he lost by majority decision in Shuto. Takanori Gomi was an international superstar already in Japan at the time, and it was his lightweight debut. And like, if you look at the run that he went on, like let's look at the Ultimate Fighter season 3 Brazil. He fought, and I'm not joking, Thiago Santos at welterweight and beat him. And then he lost to Santiago Ponzinibbio by decision. But this is just how good Leonardo Santos is, and nobody talks about him. He's the most under the radar fighter in the UFC roster. And I said it in the intro. There's a reason why. It's because he doesn't fight a lot. He took a lot of time off from 2016 to 2019 between the Martins fight and the Stevie Ray fight. When he knocked out Kevin Lee, it was in 2015. But this is a guy that you never hear about at lightweight. He's on this crazy roll. I mean, he's won 10 fights in a row. Like, he's knocking on the door of one of those guys that you should definitely pay attention to if he fights Leonardo Santos. So who's your next guy?
Oh, my next guy, and not really under the radar, but I just feel like under the circumstances in which his next fight's probably going to be fought under, Edson Barboza at 145. People aren't talking about this nearly as much as I thought they would be. I mean, Edson at 155 pounds, I always thought it was hard for him to make that weight class. Very muscle-bound guy. He's not a guy like, I don't know, Neil Magny, for instance. Like, you look at Neil Magny and you're like, okay, that guy goes to the gym. He just kind of looks like a regular dude. Edson Barboza is bodied up. And how he's going to somehow remove an extra 10 pounds to move down to 145, I don't know. I don't know if he can safely make the weight class. But what I do know is if he can make the weight class, and let's say it is kind of a Jose Aldo effect where they don't really look good the week of the fight, but when they do fight, and, you know, we can go back and forth, did Aldo win that fight? Did he not win the fight against Makhachev? But honestly, he looked pretty good moving down a weight class when we were all so worried just about his health and well-being from moving down. But Edson, on a bit of a losing streak, if you will, at 155, he lost that really hard fight to Paul Felder, hasn't fought since. That was a split decision. I thought he beat Felder, to be completely honest, but it was a really close fight, one of the more entertaining ones from last year. But when you take a guy with his kind of striking and with the speed that Edson Barboza just has, you wonder if guys at 155 can take those shots. And now I'm concerned that guys at 145 just aren't going to be able to, because he's so much bigger than everyone else at that weight class if he is able to make it safely. And if he is even at 90% of what he was at 155, he's going to knock out so many 145ers, it's not even funny. And he's going to be added to that, you know, Zabit, Yair Rodriguez, Korean Zombie. Like, 145 just to me is a little bit more exciting as a weight division. And I'm probably going to get chirped a bit in the comments, but there's not a lot of great wrestlers in 145. It's just kind of how the division's set up. When you really look at the weight class, there's a lot of strikers in that top 15, and it just makes for a lot of really fun style matchups. You've got guys like the Korean Zombie, Yair Rodriguez, Max Holloway, Volkanovski. It's just a very striking, heavy division, and Edson Barboza fits perfectly in there, and I really do think he can make his way to the top fairly quickly.
Yeah, and I mean, your champion's not a bad wrestler. I will say that in Volkanovski.
He is, but he's not a primary. Like, he goes for takedowns when he's getting the worst of the striking exchanges, but that doesn't really happen all that often. So, yes, he possesses the skill, but really in that weight class, there's not a lot of guys like, you know, Kevin Lee, like Khabib, like Colby Covington, like Kamaru Usman, who are just going to go out there, try to take you down, wear you down, and beat you up. They're going to strike with you, and it just makes for, and this a very casual thing I'm about to say, it just makes for a very fan-friendly style.
Yeah, and I mean, realistically, gone are the days of your traditional wrestlers in some of those lower weight classes, like your Chad Mendes. It's not like you have guys like that sticking around. And I mean, really, Team Alpha Male, yeah, they do have a lot of good fighters in the lower weight classes, but we're not seeing that excellence and dominance like we have.
Think of like a really top level 145er back in like for instance, Uriah Faber was a top tier featherweight in WEC. Could you imagine the skill set of Uriah Faber up against the skill set of Edson Barboza? It's just a night and day difference, and that's why I'm so excited for his move down to 145. I think it's perfect for the division. It's another big name to go against some of those prospects, because the problem with 145 is we've got all these really, really good prospects, but no one knows who they are. So Beat doesn't really have a big following outside of Russia, unfortunately. He's not really a member of the 5-round club, which is a thing that I know we were both quite concerned about. And there's other guys just like him, too, who all they need is that one big marquee win. A guy like Shane Burgos, for instance, Calvin Kattar in that group, they just need the one marquee win, and then they'll start being, you know, in that conversation of top 5 at title shots. And Edson Barboza is the perfect guy. So
now I'm gonna go way off the map again, and I'm gonna go with an older fella. And this is a guy that I saw his name thrown out there when these tweets were coming out, but we've talked about this guy before on the channel. I've talked about him as well on different podcasts. Claudio Silva. Nobody talks about Claudio Silva. He's 14-1 as a pro. He was 9-1 coming into the UFC. 2 of his wins by knockout, 9 by submission, and 3 by decision. His one loss was in his pro debut, and he lost by DQ due to an illegal elbow. So realistically, this guy's on a 14-fight win streak, comes into the UFC, like I said, at 9-1, fights Brad Scott to a decision. Now, Claudio Silva, Brazilian, great at jiu-jitsu, and you know that not just by his record, but by the way that he fights. He's a black belt in Brazilian jiu-jitsu under Ricardo Vieira. But you look at the strength of training partners he has, not just at London Shoot Fighters, but also at American Top Team where he's trained in the past. And we're talking some of the best welterweights in the world. We're talking, you know, the Jorge Masvidals and the like, and Colby Covington, just to name a couple. But you look at the primary wins that Claudio Silva's had. And normally when you're on a UFC trajectory, you just continue to go up. Claudio Silva in his first fight fights Brad Scott, wins a decision. Then he fights Leon Edwards. We're going way up there. Split decision win, welterweight debut. Then he fights Nordine Taleb, submits him. Then he fights Hot Chocolate Danny Roberts, submits him. And then he fights Cole Williams and submits him. It's just the fact that his fight against Leon Edwards, now again, I was talking like, if it's a bar graph, it's the weirdest bar graph ever. But when he beat Leon Edwards, it was in 2014. He didn't fight again until May of 2018. So that's why Claudio Silva is so under the radar and nobody's talking about him at welterweight, because he's just had such an up and down. Now he continues to win fights, but it's just not regularly that we've seen him fight. Now, the fight against Taleb, May 2018, then he fights March 2019 against Danny Roberts, then he fights August 2019 against Cole Williams. Hopefully, I mean, maybe the window is huge for Claudio Silva. Even at 37, maybe it's huge because, yes, he has a lot of fight experience, but we're talking fights that took place between 2007 and 2012, 14, that he was really active. Then he took a lot of time off. So he's not going to have a ton of miles on him, you knock on wood, if you're a big Claudio Silva stan. But hopefully we get to see more of him. He's a huge under-the-radar guy at 170. And you never know. You put together a couple of wins, and look at that. You're Damian Maia, up at the top of the division. So who knows?
Yeah, exactly. My last pick, I was going to go with Marlon Vera, but I feel like I've talked about him enough on our podcast at this point. So I'm going to go with a guy who has main evented multiple shows, oddly enough, but is no longer in the rankings. And you brought him up earlier from tough Brazil, Santiago Ponzinibbio. The biggest Argentinian star probably in all of MMA. I know people, that's something that doesn't really get mentioned, but he
him and
headlined
Laureano Staropoli. There's not a lot of Argentinians that are buzzing.
And he main evented a show in his home country, which drew a crazy crowd, a big buzz. I remember it sold out in a ridiculously fast amount of time against Neil Magny. But unfortunately, after that really good performance, we haven't seen Santiago Ponzinibbio fight. He was supposed to fight Kamaru Usman. When Usman ended up fighting Damian Maia instead, he fought Maia on short notice. That was supposed to be the fight. Ponzinibbio broke his hand, unfortunately. And I don't know about you, but especially in hindsight, like that fight was going to be so good no matter what, because you had Ponzinibbio, who, if people have forgotten, like he's probably the best striker at 170. He's got hand speed, power, and kicks. Just a phenomenal striker all around. Very similar to kind of a Jorge Masvidal style, just a little bit different, but very similar just in his skill sets. Another ATT guy too. But Ponzinibbio, he broke his hand. He had MRSA. He's had staph. He just had a really, really bad run of injuries. But if he can get back to the form that he was at the end of 2018, I don't think there's a doubt in my mind that he's not only a top 10 talent, maybe a top 5 talent, and maybe one of those guys who would get into that, top 3, get into that revolving door of kind of the Woodley, Covington, and Usman talk, because I truly think if Ponzinibbio can just defend a few takedowns from any of those guys, he can knock out any of them on the feet. So I think Ponzinibbio is a guy who, yes, he was talked about. He was a really hyped up prospect, if you will. I know he is 33, but at this point, people kind of forgot who he was, and it's really unfortunate. He needs one fight to come back, fight a top 15 guy, probably knock them out, and then he's right back to where he was. So I just think Santiago Ponzinibbio is a name that was so much in the headlines for such a long time. A few bad injuries have just kind of completely derailed the momentum of his career, unfortunately. But if he can come back near 100%, Ponzinibbio is another guy who's going to jump into that top 5.
And I mean, since we're on the topic of, the welterweight division, a lot of people are so hyped on it, whether it's UFC, whether it's Bellator, wherever. And listen, at Bellator, you have Douglas Lima as your champion. We've talked about crossover fights, UFC, Bellator. A lot of people have said that Douglas Lima, you could insert him into the UFC's top 15 and he'd have no problem trying to adjust. I'm going to talk about a prospect that's undefeated, has plenty of finishes. The guy's 23-0 with 18 finishes, 8 by knockout, 10 by submission. I'm talking Yaroslav Amosov, and I really don't think he gets the credit he deserves. Like, when we're talking about Ukrainian fighters, a lot of people think about the Klitschko brothers. You think boxing. You don't really Alexander Usyk. You might not think MMA unless you're a big Marina Moroz fan. But still, if you're looking at just top talent at 170 pounds, you cannot discount the run that Yaroslav Amosov's gone on. And I remember when he was supposed to debut, it was Bellator 202 when we saw him debut. Before that, he was supposed to be taking on Salim Touahri in 2017. Touahri ended up in the UFC. So some of the fighters that he's faced in the past, we're talking about Roberto Soldici, beat him by split decision over in Tech Prep, which, hey, what are you going to get out of Tech Prep? Well, we know that Yaroslav Amosov is one of the best grapplers and a rising striker as well. His striking continues to get better every fight, but his grappling is second to none. His wrestling is great, and that's where I'm going to bring him into the fold with Bellator. He takes on Gerald Harris in his debut, which Gerald Harris is no slouch. I mean, he's the slam king for a reason. he was able to do that before he came into Bellator, but when he was in the
Ask David
UFC,
Branch.
what's that?
Ask David Branch how the Slam King doesn't work.
Yeah, exactly. So for Yaroslav Amosov to come in against Gerald Harris, that really told me that, hey, if he can hang with the Gerald Harris, then you're going to be able to inch your way up 170. And if you continue to pass tests like that, you're in really high esteem. So his next fight is Eric Silva, beats the brakes off of Eric Silva. And I'm not talking Gabriel Fly Silva. We're talking about the perennial prospect, his brother, Eric Silva. Then he takes on David Rickles, and again, it's just a masterclass. Now I know David Rickles wasn't a big guy for 170, so still, he was able to get the win there against a primary striker in David Rickles. And then he took on Ed Ruth to cap off just an incredible run. That was back in February, Bellator 239. And when he took on Ed Ruth, I remember we talked about this. He said, "Yeah, I'm gonna out wrestle Ed Ruth." Like, that's laughable. Ed Ruth is one of the most highly decorated wrestlers in NCAA history at freestyle wrestling. He's a Division I All-American multiple time. Like, he is one of the best wrestlers ever. And like, he came out of a school in Penn State that is known for wrestling. Like, Ed Ruth is such a good wrestler. And Yaroslav Amosov went out there and put an absolute beatdown on him. And he out-wrestled him and he took him down, which is something that nobody's really been able to do against Ed Ruth.
Okay, but I'm going to throw a little caveat in there. If a wrestler's even 1% better than another wrestler, that's the outcome that you're going to get. I mean, we saw, and I know to a lesser degree, but Tatiana Suarez fought Carla Esparza, and Carla Esparza is a multiple time collegiate champ. And look what Tatiana was able to do to her, even though just based on resumes, Esparza might have had a better one. I know Suarez was chosen to the Olympic team, but she wasn't able to compete, but still. Suarez was just a little bit better, and she was able to completely ragdoll Esparza. So that's the only little thing I take away from that. I agree, though, about Amosov, where his wrestling is already a 10 out of 10. All he needs to do is just incrementally get his striking a little bit better every single fight. And no, I do 100% agree. I know I sounded like I was disagreeing with you, but no, I 100% agree. All he needs to do is advance his striking to like a 7 out of 10, and he's going to be a problem for a lot of guys. Not only in Bellator, too. If he ever does go over to the UFC, he's going to be a problem for those guys as well.
And I mean, like, we're talking about fighters, and I know some of the, and I'm not going to slag you, but I know some of the ones that you picked, they main evented before, especially with Ponzinibbio. And in Yaroslav Amosov's case, his last fight against Ed Ruth was a main event of Bellator 239. So if you're a fan of MMA outside of the UFC, maybe this isn't a guy that you've been focusing on, but you're slowly but surely going to hear more and more noise about this guy as he continues to win. And I really think he can. I mean, a lot of people talk about Khabib Nurmagomedov, strength of schedule. Well, he's 28-0. Some of those fights were 1-rounders or 2-rounders. What does that mean to his overall just pro record? Well, look at the last two. I mean, Dustin Poirier, Conor McGregor. But for Yaroslav Amosov, he's 23-0. You don't see a lot of fighters with wins like that as they continue to get into bigger and bigger promotions like the Bellators, like the UFCs. And for Yaroslav Amosov, he's on that trajectory. So for me, Leonardo Santos, Claudio Silva, and Yaroslav Amosov, you also went with some good picks there too. Matt, we're continuing on with Fight Night Picks Selects. We're hand-picking them. So throw it down in the comments. Let us know what you're thinking. Some of the fighters that, hey, maybe we missed. I know there's a lot of them out there. There's some heavyweight prospects that maybe we didn't focus on. There's a lot of different guys and gals out there. Let us know who we missed. Also, let us know what we should go with for these top lists in terms of Fight Night Picks Selects. And as always, you can find us on Twitter and Instagram at Craig Allen FNP, at Matt Allen FNP, and at Fight Night Picks. Make sure you check out the rest of the videos with the channel. We'll be linking them over on the side there. And as always, Matt, like we like to say with Fight Night Picks, let's get into it.